welcome, David.
Thank
We
you.
are so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite schools that I've visited
glad.
in the past 2 years. I think Brookstone's maybe up at the top, number one. And so
there you
now
go.
I'm back. And
There
I'm
you're
glad to
back.
be
I
here.
know. I know,
Yes.
because you were just here this fall.
Yes.
And so we
yes.
all had the privilege of hearing you speak and our students hearing you speak. And so we're so glad you got to come back today.
I think the privilege, honestly, was mine, and that's why I'm here again. Is you realize there's such a legacy in a school like this of it's a great school, but great can always be greater, and the community has that same legacy of how do we get to the next level?
Right.
And my topic is student well-being, and that's something that is so deeply important at Brookstone. So I was like, I got to get back. So here I am.
Well, for those of you who don't know your story and the message you're sharing and the work you're doing now, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so my story is unlike a lot of parents today. I mean, I got married, had a family, and I just had this big American dream. And I thought I was living that. And I thought I was kind of earning my way into that, teaching a young adult Sunday school class, coaching my 3 children in youth sports. But the truth is, what I didn't recognize is that I was falling into addiction, and then therefore my children did too. And even though on paper we thought we were doing everything right, this big American dream was turning into a nightmare. And we lost our oldest child to an accidental overdose, who was an honors college student, a track athlete at Ole Miss. We almost lost our second son, who had an overdose but recovered. And thankfully, he found a decade of recovery. Almost, our daughter struggled with eating disorder, but also she found recovery, and I found recovery as well. And what I'm doing today is, as our family, as I reclaimed my marriage, our family, despite our loss of our son, William, came back together and found our joy. What we realized is we know how to do this. And I don't mean just we. I mean, we as a community at large. And it's not a big secret, but what we have to do is kind of break the barriers that are keeping us, all families and all students and all individuals, from having the joy they want and deserve. And so somehow I ended up with a calling, and that became my passion. And so where we are today is we have the William Magee Institute for Student Wellbeing, named after our late son, which is launching at the University of Mississippi. And it gets to do external work and try to figure out solutions to a greater problem. So we get to talk to schools like the excellent leaders here at Brookstone and excellent students and faculty, and get to engage with them and other schools throughout the country and go, what are you doing that's working?
Right.
What do you hear others are doing working? And ask students, meet them. How do we meet you where you are?
Right.
And we're aiming to bring all of that together to be able to create some things that we can then take into schools, so that we can help get the tools necessary to arm today's students and tomorrow's students to be better equipped to deal with the pressures and challenges they face today around mental health and substance misuse.
It's such worthy work. It really is.
And needed right now, like more than ever before. I mean, the studies are clear, and it knows no boundaries. It's in every community. It's at every economic level. It's at every teens today are suffering in ways, mental health wise, that we've never seen before.
Right. We see that anecdotally. We know that.
Yes.
We all know that.
Yes.
So what are some of the things you found that we can do better as schools, as
and
parents?
And I would say even as parents, and that's a great question. Parents ask me often, if there's one thing you could tell me, if there's just one. I say, hey, I got one. I got one. Number one, talk to your students, your teens, in open-ended questions. We have the studies show that they don't respond well when we're telling them what they should do, what they should not do, how they should feel. What they respond to, even if they don't initially so much, is they have a better chance of figuring out where they are, to let them be seen and heard by asking them open-ended questions. How did it feel when you stayed home with your parents on Friday and you saw on social media that all your friends were out?
Right.
Because that's actually a real thing. And our parent can't help, our parent role can't help but try to tell them, I mean, you've got so many friends and everything's great, and you've got that cheer thing in Disney next week, and you've got everything going. I mean, don't let that bother you.
Right.
But easier said than done.
So
Easier
much.
said than done because things
Mhm.
have changed and we live in a different environment. And it's not really whether when we're feeling alone or depressed or isolated, it's not really a matter of does it make sense? It's a matter of is that really how we feel? And if
Right.
so, it often needs attention.
Right. Right. Ooh, it's just, there's so many layers of those emotions that you
Yeah,
have to.
and it's hard, and so what I tell parents is the way to make it easy is ask them open-ended
Yep.
questions because when you close the questions, your students can't find things that are within themselves. Like, often they don't know the answer to
Right.
tell you, but when
Right.
you ask
Right.
open-ended questions, they'll be shy at first, but if you keep
Mhm.
at it,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
keep at it, eventually the answer will come, and a lot of times
Right.
it's an answer your teen didn't even know.
Mhm.
I've done it once I kinda learned that tactic, I practice it a lot, when I can with young people if they're saying, "Hey, I'm struggling a little bit and I'm trying to help them get to a counselor or a treatment."
Mhm.
And I use that tactic and often I'm 6 questions in and suddenly they reveal something that they're surprised about that
Right.
they didn't see
Right.
coming. I'll
Right.
have a teen say I had a college student not too many months ago say, "I'm suffering from anxiety." And I asked him
Mhm.
a lot of questions and he was positive. It's just anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use alcohol. Yeah, I use
Yeah.
marijuana on a regular basis, but it's
Mhm.
just because I suffer from anxiety.
Right.
His parents could just tried to convince me of the same thing. It's just
Mhm.
anxiety. I'm saying, well, sure, it may be. What do I know? I
Right.
don't want to. I'm not a counselor. I'm not going to try to be. But he wasn't ready to go for counseling because in his mind he was self-medicating. He
Mhm.
thought marijuana would solve it because
Mhm.
he'd heard
Mhm.
that. Well,
Right.
that's actually not true. For a
Right.
lot of people, marijuana use will actually increase their anxiety
Yeah.
depending on their personality type or something. So, and I said, you're not even, 21, your brain is not ready for it anyway.
Right.
But what happened is I started asking him open-ended questions, and
Mhm.
what he ended up revealing
Mm.
was, "Oh my gosh, maybe I have a drinking problem."
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so he couldn't have even told me that when we first
Mhm.
started talking.
Mhm. Mhm. So you just gotta keep
You
talking.
gotta keep asking them
Mhm.
open-ended
Mhm.
questions and let them tell you how they feel, and
Mhm.
that's how you can figure out, do they really need counseling? And
Right.
if they suggest they are feeling deep anxiety or depression and they say it, there's no sense. I mean, really, the temptation of a parent, as I said earlier, is to try to talk them out of it.
Mhm.
Really, what they need to hear is, "I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
How can I help?
Yeah.
How can we
Mhm.
help? There's counselors and treatment available.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, are you comfortable doing that?" And then you
Right.
make a phone call. "I'm so sorry.
Right.
How can I help?"
Right.
There's really no point trying to talk them out of what they've revealed is real.
Right. Right. Ooh, and as a parent, that can be overwhelming,
Well, it
as you
can
know.
be. It
Ooh.
can be. And I think as parents, it's overwhelming because I wrote a whole book about it. My memoir, Dear William, is it's
Yes.
overwhelming because guess what? I was lost
Mhm.
in my journey.
Right.
I
Right.
needed somebody asking me some open-ended
Right.
questions
Mhm.
because I could
Mhm.
barely manage myself. And
Mhm.
frankly, I tell parents, it's okay that you are facing some of the same fears and concerns or anxiety or
Mhm.
depression or even
Mhm.
substance self-medication. You're not
Right.
alone. You're hardly the
Right.
first. It's okay.
Right.
But it does
Right.
make it hard. It
Right.
does make it hard because you feel the pain of your children so very much.
Oh, you
We
do.
do not want
Oh,
our
you do.
children to suffer even the slightest pain.
Completely. Yeah. Don't want that at all. You hurt when your kids hurt.
You
And
feel every bit of
mhm.
it, and if
Mhm.
someone hurts their feelings, a
Mhm.
friend, you feel it like 10 times over,
Right.
and,
Right.
but what we have to remember is we have to keep the dialogue. The studies show that that students have. That's why I love a school like Brookstone. The studies
Mhm.
show that the more mentors and role models
Mhm.
you have, that you have a much better chance of success. That's
Right.
one. Two,
Right.
that the more you are engaged in structure,
Mhm.
but also engaged not just with role models, but
Mhm.
peers and around things with structure, you
Mhm.
also statistically have a much better chance of
Mhm.
success. So
Mhm.
that's why,
Mhm.
a school like this can do such incredible work as they do. Jacob Crowder, I mean, I've
Oh,
gotten to know him and I see
he's
how students
wonderful.
trust him. I
Mhm.
see how he
Mhm.
loves and trusts them.
Yes.
Marty Lester, the leadership of them really understanding
Mhm.
how do we help not just teach algebra, but how do we
Right.
help our students develop as whole beings? How do we help them learn who they are to stand on their own 2 feet and to make decisions for their best interest? And I'm really proud of that work they do here.
Well, thank you. I am too. I'm grateful to be a part of that because, we have to address all the things that our kids are going through and struggling with that, like you said, I think are on the rise.
Yes.
In many ways.
Well, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
And so, as parents, obviously they're obvious signs for us to look for, but what are some things we need to be paying attention to?
Look, the obvious are you hear change in behavior, but that's not always a giveaway, for example, that your child is struggling with substances because as we all know, teens hit puberty and bam, behavior changes, period. But a giveaway I say to look for is, have they stopped looking you in the eyes? And I don't mean occasionally. So I don't want every parent listening to panic and go, my child hadn't looked me in the eyes and like, oh my gosh, they're really struggling. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if this becomes a pattern and you're asking them open-ended questions and they cannot ever look up to you and engage, you might need to think hard about getting them into some counseling pretty quickly because it's not a given, but it's a major red flag warning sign.
Yeah.
Eye-to-eye engagement is critical. Eye-to-eye engagement. When I'm in schools around, I'm humbled that I get to speak at a lot of schools and some universities around the country, and when these students speak to me, I try to lock eyes with them, and I can tell where they are in the day based on are they locking back with me.
How about that?
And you learn eye to eye. When my marriage and my wife and I really went through a hard time, I probably quit engaging eye to eye with her, and that pains me to say that. We're happy. Don't feel sorry for us. It's okay.
It's a beautiful story,
but it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay, and I wasn't okay, and I could not just look eye to eye with her. And I think that that's a red flag. I really do.
Yeah. That's such a good
Doesn't
point.
mean they're doing anything wrong. It just means they're uncomfortable with where they are.
Right. Exactly.
And they're ashamed to show you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think shame plays so much into so much of this when people are trying to hide and cover and self-medicate. And you just want to create a place where it's safe for them, to where there is no judgment, where there is nothing but help. And so, speak to that a little bit. That's what we're trying to do here at school.
Well, I think it's really working. Actually, but it's funny because as I travel around, it's a running joke around me. People are like, he's trying to talk about Brookstone again. I have this thing that wherever it comes up, I'm like, have I told you about Brookstone? Have I told you about Brookstone? Have I told you about Brookstone? It's really, it's a true story. And, but the truth of the matter is everywhere, we used to think, oh, that's their problem, or that's their problem, or that's their problem. It's now in every single community, the CDC. And I'm like, look, if the CDC's getting there, then hello, we got a problem. The CDC says teens today are in absolute crisis, and that young women in particular, middle school ages are at just catastrophic crisis around suicidal ideation, sadness, aloneness.
Right.
And it hurts me so bad to say that often I speak to middle school students, and I knew that anecdotally already because a lot of times when I'm talking about what I faced as a teen, about aloneness and depression, and what my daughter faced with an eating disorder, and my son William, I look out across the audience and I'll see young women, tears streaming down their face, and sometimes it's all I can do not to break out sobbing because I just want to go give everyone all of the support they deserve and say, you are okay. And I want to ask them an open-ended question, what can I do for you? And I think that the reality is it is everywhere, in no human. It's not just everywhere. There is no human in this earth. I just didn't understand it when I went through it. I thought it was just me.
Right.
I was embarrassed.
Right.
The shame you talk about.
Right.
There is no human that at some point doesn't feel, even the most successful professional or athlete or whatever, doesn't feel, am I a fraud?
Right.
Am I am I a fraud here? Who am I really? Or feel alone
Right.
or feel others are leaving them out. Could be
Yeah.
family members or friends
Absolutely.
or feel like, you know what, I just don't feel like doing it today. I can't get myself moving and I don't know why. I mean, these are so natural traits of humanity, yet we have attached such things of stigma around it that people are embarrassed to say.
Right.
And that's what we have to break down, and that's what we have to help students understand, because all humans, adults included, use substances to change how they feel. So if you start feeling shame, you're a lot more likely to use substances to hit dopamine to trick yourself into thinking you don't feel shame. You feel a false sense of joy. It's a false front. It's just stoking that dopamine thing. And when that wears off, you may even feel worse usually than you did before.
Right. It's a vicious cycle.
Vicious cycle.
Yep, for sure. So, I love, I was looking at your website for the Institute.
Yeah.
Tell me about, I wrote it down, the happiness team.
Oh,
Tell me about that, because that
Yeah.
that brought joy to me, even thinking that was part of
Yeah.
your initiative. So what is the happiness team?
So what we've learned is, and I'm proud that, Brookstone is already doing some peer-to-peer education pieces. And the research shows that, when we talk about, like, we are teens struggling today, right? The research is very clear that peers help peers. Peer-to-peer works. There's things we know, mentors, but peer-to-peer is such a critical part, and maybe at the top.
Yeah.
And it's ironic that if you go to most schools across America, public, private, doesn't matter, well-endowed, not, most schools across America, the one thing we know works is not being done anywhere.
Really?
Very ironic. So what we decided is a lot of our work, we needed to delve into that. So we created a happiness team, and we invited students to join up to help us learn storytelling, that we could come up with topics to help then take those college students into high schools and other places to be able to share peer-to-peer stories about aloneness, depression, substance misuse, things that they faced, so that other students can feel like, oh, it's not just me. It's not just me.
Right.
And I'm happy to tell you, a lot of people, I would say everybody at Brookstone knows the Smiths, and we have a student, Clark Smith, who's on our happiness team. I kid you not.
He's one of my favorite people.
And he has this amazing
Smith.
story. I don't want to steal his thunder. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I will just say he's got an amazing story about, being identified as a good student and a friend, but as an athlete. And he went to college and felt like he needed to continue that. And it was, at some point realizing, but is it time for me to move away from that and the feelings that he had? So, since you do know him and love him, I do too. And he's by all check marks, he's successful. He is, and he is amazingly so, but he's also human.
Right.
And so you get the idea of peer-to-peer education, because he looks perfect, but he lets you know that he's not.
Right.
By saying, I experience feelings of aloneness. Am I in the wrong place, wrong time? What am I supposed to do with myself? Where am I supposed to be? And that's what the happiness team is about. He's got his joy, and he made changes, and he's doing great.
That's awesome.
That's kind of what I did in my life when I was at a juncture and I was losing my marriage and my family and everything else. I'm like, it was a different circumstances than he faced. He's just trying to decide, where am I supposed to be? With me, I decided who am I supposed to be and how am I supposed to be? And but I think we get to these junctures, and peer to peer can help young people get there more easily, because they realize they're not alone. You can't look at someone even like that and go, oh, this football star, they got everything. But no, they're actually human, and they don't have any more than you have, because we humans actually are all equal.
Yes. Yes, and we all go through the same things.
All go through the very same things,
and
just maybe at different times.
Right. And why do we put people on a pedestal and think, well, they can't possibly go through what I'm going through?
Know.
So I think that's such an effective way to share that message.
And I'm proud of the peer-to-peer work Brookstone is doing. So secret, out of the bag, that's really what I'm doing here. I'm so impressed by the work that Brookstone is doing. A colleague and myself are here to learn more, to think about how some of these good things here might be able to be duplicated elsewhere.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. Because it's all about sharing what works.
Sharing what works. It takes a village.
Right. It takes a village. And it at the heart of that is wanting to take care of our kids.
Yes.
And whatever it takes.
Yes.
And it's the conversation has changed so much since, I was in high school. So if when you're talking to high schoolers now, what are some of the things that you want to impart to them most?
Okay. Number one, my favorites. I say, you've been sold a bad bill of goods about marijuana, your generation. And I say, look, I'm not passing any judgment on legal, not legal. I don't care if it's legal everywhere. Whatever is the health, whatever's for the best for the health of the country, what research shows, that's fine. But the research is clear on this. For young minds, it is extremely damaging. It is debilitating, and we are seeing ridiculous amounts of soaring marijuana addiction and even psychosis, and we're seeing young men impacted more specifically by that. Not sure of all the reasons why. Also, the reason is marijuana is about 400% stronger today, street marijuana, than it was in 1995. Wow. So a lot of the cultural stories that are told of this not being addictive, this not being harmful, formed when in a different era and a different day. Today, it is incredibly potent, and it's used in ways, vaping and other means, that is incredibly potent. And I'm telling you, on college campuses across this country, we're hearing over and over student affairs people say, and doctors. I was just talking to a doctor in not my college community, but another one recently, and he said, students are just, their marijuana addiction is stunning. And he said, I'll see them even try to quit for a couple of days and they're vomiting. He's like, do people know this? I said, no, they don't know it. And students, I'll even have students tell me, well, I'm just self-medicating for anxiety. And I say, like I said a minute ago, I was like, and I just try to give them research. I say, okay, I hear you. But I say, did you know that for at least 50% of the people that use it, depending on your personality type and what strain, that it actually is not only not taking your anxiety away, it is greatly exacerbating it. So you're just drowning in anxiety because of it, plus a whole lot of other things. And that's the big thing. Also, the fact that even in states where it's legal now, and of course it's 21, so that doesn't apply to students at all, but even states where it's legal, most sales are still, according to studies, street marijuana. And then once that's happening, people have a relationship with a drug dealer, and then they're often selling counterfeit pills that have fentanyl in them. So that the message that I see to students, I say is, don't take this lightly. Really think about, you do whatever you want, I tell them. What you do is your choice ultimately. But what I would say is, as a young person, the studies say the more time you can give yourself with a clear mind, if you're sure you want to do that, what I always say is just wait. Just wait and let your mind develop. And the studies show that the longer a teen goes without using substances, or misusing substances, the much greater the likelihood that they will not have their joy stolen by substances later. So it's like let their brain develop. Just take your time. Just take a deep breath and figure out later what you want to do. And actually, it's kind of a joke, right? Because if they take their time and then don't, they're actually probably not going to later. Yeah. And I don't really want them to. When I say it's your choice later, it is their choice because I know it is. But what I want is them to have the same clear-minded joy that I have and my son Hudson has, who when he got off marijuana, he's like, I learned that because 10, 11 years ago when he got off of it, he's like, wow, I wish somebody had told me. I didn't tell him. I told him not to because I just didn't like it. But I tried to punish him out of it. I didn't understand that my boys needed counseling. Because they didn't need to be in trouble. They were doing something to change how they felt, and there was some deep-rooted issue there.
So speak to that a little bit too. So you have a child who is in the grips of it. What can we do as families at that point? Therapy,
or treatment. It works. And often parents are afraid of the stigma of that, but it works. It works. And it works better, the more long-lasting, the earlier you get it. And so I tell parents, sometimes I'll have a parent say, he's mostly struggling or she's mostly struggling, but I think it's anxiety. And they're trying to talk themselves out of counseling or treatment because they can't handle the they think that's going to be like a scarlet letter on their child if they go to treatment even. But I talked to a young lady this past fall who who was a 11th grader in high
Mhm.
school, and she had gone away. As a 10th grader, she had just had to leave and go to residential eating disorder treatment,
Mhm.
and she was really the first in her school that
Mhm.
people knew that had gone and come
Mhm.
back. A few had
Right.
left and not come back.
Right.
And she said, I was afraid of the stigma. She said, what I realized is when I came back, I'm thriving, and what they
Yeah.
knew me before as was sick.
Yeah.
And I had potential, but I was struggling.
Right.
And
Mhm.
what I came back as is thriving. And so my hangups about coming back to school, I realized I'm helping break the stigma because people are watching me thrive now,
Mhm.
and they can see, like, you can do this, and you not
Mhm.
only can do it, you
Mhm.
will absolutely flourish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've deepened your emotional intelligence, you've
Right.
deepened your personal problem solving, and
Mhm.
that's how we humans do flourish
Right.
individually and even collectively, is we're
Yeah.
able to think through and problem solve and not just cast false blame
Mhm.
elsewhere.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, it's so true.
Hmm.
It's so true. And talking about community, you met with, as we said, some of my favorite people today,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and it's true in so many different areas of our lives, but especially in this, to be able to come together as parents, and as Mr. Blanchard is very well
Yes.
known for saying, locking arms and lifting each other
Mm.
up, and to be able to create an environment at our school, in our
Mm.
faith communities, in our
Yes.
families, to where, like, there is no shame. We are in this together. Like, we are going to just do this together.
So well said.
Mhm.
And that actually is the secret to success. We just
Mhm.
have to begin the open dialogue.
Mhm.
There should be nothing but join in arms and moving forward on
Mhm.
this. This
Mhm.
is the unity path of
Right.
the
Right.
health and well-being of all individuals,
Right.
of all families, and
Right.
therefore our community, and those communities, if we do this right, will spread across America. Our
Right.
families are
Right.
hurting today at all
Mhm.
levels, and
Mhm.
we need to join together and just say,
Mhm.
let's move forward. But
Right.
it does, there's strength in numbers in that, and
Mhm.
people with shared minds and who understand God's grace and
Mhm.
forgiveness of how, we humans are broken, but there
Mhm.
is that better day, that new moment is just a fingertip away, and it's
Right.
joining together to help bring that new opportunity and that grace to so many. And I think
Right.
collectively it's self-fulfilling. The more people
Mhm.
see that success, the more
Right.
people want to join the movement.
Right. Right. Totally. And to not be afraid to ask for help,
That's right.
and to admit
Yeah.
we need help as a family,
That's
as a
right.
person, all those things.
And as a community,
As a
we really
community.
do.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, so what gives you hope, and when
Yeah.
how do you stay in this business, if you will,
Mhm.
and keep your hope, and
Yeah.
not get discouraged by all the bad news that
Yeah.
can be out there,
Well, I
because
know
there is
because
a lot.
I'll have people call me up and say, "Hey, can you talk to my child and help get them into treatment or something?" And I
Mhm.
get to know them, and then I'll lose them to an overdose,
Mm,
and it just
mm.
makes you sick.
Yeah.
And you think,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
But then you do find that next moment is a new beginning, and you
Right.
do, stick to your principles of um faith and how you
Mhm.
move forward. And that's a big part of it for me. And
Mhm.
honestly, what drives me forward, though, is I've seen so much success because I've
Yeah.
seen it actually does work.
Right.
There are so many studies on human happiness and joy and flourishing. We know how to get there,
Yeah.
but like we know how to solve algebra problems and how to teach it. But now what we have to do, since we have all these studies of human happiness and joy and flourishing and all that, we have to bring all that together and put some
Yeah.
tools in place that we can enact in communities all across America to
Mhm.
start reaching students at kindergarten.
Right.
People say, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. You got to start getting to high school students." I'm like, "Hello, I don't think so. We're going a lot more upstream
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
We're targeting kindergarten.
Yeah.
We're starting at the K."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but when you see families restored, when you
Mhm.
see individuals restored, and when you see people like my daughter who was just
Mhm.
in the grips of eating disorder and didn't know how
Mhm.
she could get out of it,
Mhm.
and you see them find their joy and then move on to families and life that is flourishing,
Mhm.
it that gives you all, even in mid the heartbreak, it gives you all the encouragement you need.
Yeah, for sure. Well, your whole family's a walking testimony.
It's
Really.
amazing. It's amazing that they gave me the blessing to tell it was one thing to tell my story in my
Right.
memoir, Dear William.
Right.
It was
Right.
another for my wife, for my son Hudson, my daughter Mary Hallie, my son William was gone, so he didn't have a say. I just had his story in my hands. But all those that are still with us, they had to give me their blessing to reveal a lot of scars and a lot of pain. And they're still on this earth, and I don't know how they did that. I don't know, but they did. They came to me and said, "You don't need our permission. Write anything you want."
Wow.
And just tell the truth and tell the story to help others. And they were the heroes of that Dear William story. They really are, because it people say, "I can't believe you revealed all that for yourself." I'll be like, yeah, but that's my story. What about me telling the story of my family members? And without them, the book doesn't happen. Without them giving me that blessing, the book doesn't happen. Then this school movement's not happening. It's just none of it happening. And that's why it takes some selfless acts to lock arms, as you say, and move forward.
Right. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
It is a beautiful book.
Thank you.
And so like you said, you laid everything out there. What do you hope that people will take away from it?
I think that my message in my memoir, Dear William, is it's not a book of addiction, even though the publishers have to categorize them.
Right.
It's mental health, it's addiction, it's a faith book. I mean, but it's about resilience. It's about resilience. And I have a line I wrote in the book, and I wrote it. You think I could remember exactly what it is? I'm going to write it down someday where I can pull it out, because sometimes I go, what was that line I wrote? But the general concept is resilience is the most generous friend of a salvage. Resilience is the salvaged soul's most generous friend. I think that's how I read it. Resilience is the salvaged soul's most generous friend. And you feel like when you're at that moment, like I was, and I was counting my last breaths. I mean, I probably got down to number 1. And when you learn to just find some tool to get you to that next moment, that resilience pays enormous dividends. And that's a lesson that I want Dear William, my book, and this journey to teach to others, because it's the resilience that gives hope, because it does restore, and the joy does come, and a lot of other things come, and it's so generous, and it just feels in that moment like it'll never come.
Right. There's always a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance.
Indeed.
I've
seen people use a 79th chance where everybody written them off, and you say, don't give up on that person.
Right.
And you look and like, oh my, I got a student that was that way recently. I know him well. And I mean, I'm not going to not deny that at times I thought, I don't know if he's going to make it. But he did. And he is.
It's just beautiful.
And he's thriving.
Right. And that's what you want. You want to be able to see that.
Yeah. And I get to see enough of those to keep me coming back for more.
Well, good. Well, I cannot thank you enough for this story, and for being willing to write it, and for using your heartbreak to help lead others to healing.
Thank you. Thanks.
It is profound work you're doing.
Thank you.
So whatever we can do to help, we want to do it.
Well, I think that I've been working on a lot of that at Brookstone on this trip with my colleague and friend Alexis Lee. We've had an amazing visit. And what I would tell people too is tune in to, we've got this new podcast that we've launched. So I work in the William Magee Institute for Student Wellbeing at the University of Mississippi, named after our late son. And within the Institute, we have the Mayo Lab. And we just launched the Mayo Lab podcast. Our Mayo Lab is where we'll do a lot of our work with schools. And we just launched the Mayo Lab, M-A-Y-A-O, the Mayo Lab podcast with David Magee, M-A-G-E-E. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, wherever Apple iTunes, wherever podcast you listen to them. And that podcast is built for parents.
Awesome.
Every single episode is about how to talk to your students, experts talking about substances, what parents should know. That podcast is built for parents.
That's perfect. That is perfect. So we will include links to all of that.
Great.
And when we publish this one, because like I said, it takes a community. We are all in this
And thanks
together.
for your podcast. This has been amazing, and I'm just so honored. And I look forward to all my trips back to Brookstone.
Yes, no kidding. This is just your first interview.
This is my second.
Well,
second of more to come.
There you go.
There you go.
So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.